Thank you so much, Shaniko. Our next speaker is going to be Andre.
Home theater. All right.
No, you're good. You can see the whole. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk about a lot of different topics. Kindness and optimism are kind of on top of the list, but I'm going to start at a very low point, which is this journal of March to August of 2020. Yeah, that is correct. And we start, I'm going to flip this and this is going to go on the page. March 30th, 2020. Today was really not what I expected. I had a call for AP French at 10 a.m., I did yoga, I had lefty salmon croquettes for lunch and called my friends on Snapchat. But when 2 came, Mike DeWine, that's the governor of Ohio. Yes, I'm from Ohio. Yeah! Announced no more school until May 1st, and that hurts a lot. I won't be able to grasp it until it actually comes time for the end of the year, but like, wow, that's another month. And now I'm just kind of sitting around. I've done 0 homework and I can't really fathom virtual school for the rest of the year. This is really the turning point for me. I've kind of just fallen behind in every class, senioritis. So hopefully life can go back to normal or find a new normal sooner rather than later. Spoiler alert, it didn't. It did not do that. But I did get one thing very right in this, which is it was a turning point day. Just not maybe for the reasons I would have hoped. I think this is the last time in this whole journal that I used the word hopefully. Yeah. May 9th, 2020. I definitely feel better without the burden of school. It's not a huge difference. There's still a lot to do. Still have AP exams though. I then go on a little tangent where I brag about my performance in Halo 5, and then I say, a good day, no doubt. And yet, I remain unsatisfied, unmotivated. Not unhappy, but underwhelmed. Surviving with such little effort encourages me to remain lethargic. Well, in any case, tomorrow is Mother's Day, so we'll see what happens there. I was a mess, if that was not very clear. But I do think there's an important point here. I wasn't actively sad all the time, but it was like the volume knob on life had been turned down. My highs were closer to the medium, and my lows didn't really feel like they meant anything. I just felt this general state of indifference. And my journal entries after this point just got shorter and shorter. And if you ever needed a visual indicator of what it felt like for the days to blur together, this was May 12th, 2020, took up about a page. And this is almost the entire month of August. Just a complete jumbled mess, all condensed together. The highs and lows just melted into this malaise. It felt like it didn't really mean anything. And over the course of these months, it was like my hope and optimism were just slowly siphoned out of me. I think that's kind of the case for a lot of us. So, my goal today is to try to give some of that back. Not by just turning a blind eye to the world's problems, but by acknowledging them and also acknowledging that we do have agency. We can legitimately make an impact on people around us. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's a really important point to start with. And I think there's a very profound nature to it if we really break it down. So if you imagine this sort of scale, where one end is extreme pessimism, and the other is extreme optimism. I'm not trying to be toxically positive. I'm not trying to say that, sure, these bad things are happening, but so what? Really, here's what we can do about it, that's more important. That's kind of invalidating the importance of how bad the bad things can be. On the other end, though, is this extreme pessimism, where you say, sure, those good things are happening, but who cares? So what? How can you focus on that when there's so much bad happening? And that isn't helping anyone. So I want to be able to say, here's the bad news in all its badness, and here's what you can do about it in all its goodness. I deeply believe that the existence of one need not diminish the gravity or the urgency of the other. So with that said, let's go back in time to my high school self. Pictured here, looking so normal and so comfortable, in a position that he's really happy in. Just everyone get in a suit, you just sort of squat down like a frog, and you see this really nice, really honest smile. So that was my senior photo. But in all seriousness, this version of me was very similar to the person I am now, but there were some very crucial differences. I was raised to think that arrogance is the worst trait a person can have, and that is a good thing to think. I think to some degree it led me to be very kind to others and selfless, but one unintended consequence of it is that I conflated arrogance and confidence, and I definitely didn't have either of them. I was very self-deprecating, I had a lot of negative self-talk, and so I'm going to show you some posts, some excerpts from my spam Instagram account with like 30 followers, all my high school friends, from some low moments in like my junior year of high school. Prepare yourself. It's not like it's really, really awful stuff, but it is going to be kind of mean to myself. So, I am the most disconnected human being I know. I think way too much, and there's no community in which I am truly indispensable. I still wholeheartedly believe that my emotions are almost never reciprocated. I still wholeheartedly believe that I'm nobody's first choice. April 18th, 2019. And then June 8th, 2019. Why am I always liked but never loved? Why am I everyone's friend but nobody's best friend? At the end of the day, it feels like nobody hates me quite as much as I do. I just don't understand why I'm living the life I'm living, nor why I seem so distant from my own existence and experiences. Dark stuff, which is why it's so funny that my cousin commented, word. Anyway, it's very clear from these posts that I had absolutely no concept of intrinsic value at this point in my life. I saw value in myself only insofar as I provided value for other people. I was engaged in this one-way imaginary arms race where if I could be kind enough to my friends, they would have no choice but to be kind back to me, and that would give me value, and then I could show that I actually mean something. But that isn't fair to them, and it's not fair to myself either. If you're giving with the expectation of receiving, then you're never going to feel fulfilled from just the giving alone. But fortunately, my friends didn't give up on me. They didn't just let me sit in this state. They were very emotionally intelligent and mature and showed me unconditional love. We can imagine a world where if they were on the toxically positive end of that spectrum we talked about earlier, they might see all this and go, yeah, man, that sucks, but you're still a good person and you've got a lot to look forward to, and you know, it's your life's good. Which might sound compassionate, but it would kind of invalidate that this was really taking up a lot of space in my brain and wouldn't let me sit in how awful that all felt. And on the other side of the extreme pessimism, I think it's even worse, because if my friends thought they were truly powerless, they would never have reached out to me at all, because what's the point? If they can't solve my problems, then why would they reach out to me in the first place? But they did reach out to me, and they did make a difference. My own experience proves the falsity of that pessimistic argument, because they completely reshaped the person I am. In particular, I want to point out my favorite compliment I've ever received, which was just a month after this, on my birthday, July 3rd, 2019. My friend sent me a text that just said, "Happy birthday, Andre. Thank you for being precisely who you are." That was it. I think that's the most concise and beautiful compliment in the world. It says so much with so little. It's the most beautiful representation of what unconditional love looks like. And I'm really glad my friends were the way they were, because they did change the person I am. And if they didn't, I would still be this version of myself. It looks like I was at a wedding, and I was like standing, like trying to go to the bathroom, I was waiting, and then, someone was in there for so long, I was knocking on the door, didn't do anything, so I walked outside and was like, fine, I'll go to some random forest, and I'll use the bathroom there, and I squatted down, and then a wedding photographer was over there and went, smile, and I turned and I was like, anyway, I don't mean to bash this version of myself too much. He did some good stuff, actually. This was my senior year, and with all the lessons I learned from my friends, I started to apply them, and recognize that I actually did also have some power and I could change some things. So this is a top-down view of my high school, and what I would start to do, if you can press one more slide there, this is the bus ramp where everyone had to go to get to their cars or to the buses. I would go to this door right here, and every day from 2:21 p.m. to 2:27 p.m., I would hold that door, hold it open for every person passing through. Your first thought might be, why would you do that? What's the point of that? Who's really benefiting from that? And that's not an irrational response to have. I wasn't changing the world with that single action. But I think a more pertinent question, rather than asking why do that, is why not? Why not hold the door for those 6 minutes between student council and theater practice? What else am I gonna do that's more productive with those 6 minutes? And it's true, most people coming through, it didn't really mean much to them. Some of it meant absolutely nothing. Some people, it was just a nice little deed that made them smile, or maybe it saved them a half second of them having to push back the door when it fell on them. But once or twice a week, there was someone who was coming from that field you saw on the right with a stereo or with a sousaphone from marching band. And for that guy, it was actually really important that I was holding the door open. I saved him quite a lot of time. And I think there's a beautiful metaphor in there, which is that if there's even a 1% chance that holding the door, someone's going to be walking through with a sousaphone, isn't it worth doing, right? As someone who's been on the other end of that before, it's so meaningful. Not literally. I don't make a habit of holding sousaphone cases and walking around places. I actually played the trombone in high school. But what I mean is, in those moments where you're feeling low and you feel like nothing's working in your life, but you don't have the strength to reach out to your friends and ask for help, sometimes someone will just shoot a random, perfectly timed text, and it feels like everything just aligned, and you heard it exactly when you needed to, and it brings you from this low point back up to a baseline. And that is really meaningful. So, in terms of the feeling of what's the point, why would you do that? I think that is a very common response to what we can just call kindness, small acts of kindness. It feels like they're inadequate. I really like a Malcolm Gladwell quote, which is, kindness is just a temporary suspension of indifference. There's nothing more than that. You're just going from a state of being neutral, not focusing on what's outside of you, to actively making one choice to make something better. But that's also the magic of it in a certain way. It's not some innate quality of some predetermined set of saints. It's a skill. It's a conscious choice, a daily commitment to suspend indifference. And the kindest people we know have just practiced that choice enough that it's become a habit. So I tried to make it a habit. I was holding the door, and then I also tried to do some other things. I started a habit of writing notes to people that I was in theater shows with, and I would give them to them opening night. And I tried to make sure that I had an interaction with each person in the cast so that I could write something meaningful in it. And that, at this point, it was a completely different experience than the kindness I had for the start of high school. In high school, I was being kind for the sake of hopefully receiving something back and because I thought it was the right thing to do. Now, the giving was the reward in and of itself. This took a while to write all of these, but it was really something that I derived pleasure from on its own. And it was really satisfying to see people's reaction to it as well, but I wasn't expecting someone to write something back to me. If they did, that would be great, but that wasn't the point. And that is a really important shift, and that was where that intrinsic value came in. And then I did the same thing in the same kind of format when I went abroad. This was the last day I gave these all out to people, and it felt like I was putting a nice bow on my experience. And I didn't even have the option of them writing back to me because it was when I was leaving France to go back to the US. I've tried to do this in other ways as well. There's a little tradition that started in a small way of making little binders on people's birthdays, where you gather some notes from their friends and maybe from their parents and even some of their friends from home maybe, and just put together a little binder to give to them as a physical gift. And I'm not pointing out these things to try to say, aren't I so kind and awesome? I'm so cool. But rather to show that this doesn't really take that much work. It's not something that is unique or out of reach. it's completely accessible to just about anybody. And this was what really made me recognize that just like my friends in high school, I too have power. I too can legitimately make a change. There's a really good video I like by Hank Green that kind of talks about the importance of believing that you can make a change. It's about the Inflation Reduction Act, which if you're not familiar was widely regarded as the biggest piece of climate change legislation ever enacted by any country in the world. And it also had some very, very frustrating concessions that are like keeping certain areas of fossil fuels alive for like an entire generation, which is really, really, really hard to take. And in the video, Hank Green walks through the bill, every individual part of it, and looks at the bad, and it explains all of it, and then looks at the good, and explains all of it. And it seems like he'd be right in the middle of that scale, but he ends up leaning more optimistic. There's a quote that he says that I really, really like, which is, "Nothing gets done if you don't believe it can be done." And that is really, really where this feeling of powerlessness needs to be destroyed, because otherwise you're not going to do anything. The moment you don't believe you can make a difference, hope turns to cynicism and compassion turns to indifference. It happens quietly, slowly, in the backdrop of an otherwise busy life, and it's not even irrational, it's completely adaptive. If we completely, fully empathized with everything we saw on social media or on Apple News, we wouldn't be able to function in society because there's just so much suffering out there. So don't blame us for it, but we still need to fight back against it. We still need to make sure that we are able to experience things and have confidence that we can make a change. Because the moment you begin to believe you are powerless, you have already lost. The moment you begin to believe you are powerless, you have already lost. I want to close by focusing on a different story, the story of my grandfather, Jean-Claude Arbouet. He was born in Haiti. And I just dropped my notebook. He was born in Haiti with no refrigerator, no toys. He had one pair of shoes that he shared with his brothers. If anyone would be completely justified in feeling angry at the world and being selfish, it would be him. And that is the exact opposite of what he did. I don't even understand how, but he remained optimistic, and he specifically said he was grateful because at least his family had enough money to afford school. And there's no toxic positivity in that. Instead, it's a recognition of how horrible the circumstances were and a radical acceptance of these two opposing truths. In his own words, no matter how bad things are in life, there's also hope, and some others in the world are living with practically no hope. Every time we visited him in New York, once him and my grandma there moved to the United States, or they met each other in the United States, but once they settled down in New York, we'd visit them and he'd always have Oreos and ice cream and Gatorade for some reason, because that was what me and my cousin and my brother liked a lot, and every single time he would make sure it was there. That's a small act of kindness, but no act of kindness is too small. He said, "Live a life of decency. If it is in your power to help someone, then do it." So simple, so beautiful, and so true. And it is in our power to help someone. In fact, it's in our power to help someone right now. If you would be willing to do this, please get out your phone. And I want you to think of somebody in your life who brought you from your squatting in the forest high school version of yourself into the version of yourself that you are now. Someone who has made a genuine positive impact. And just shoot them a quick text that says something about how grateful you are for them. It doesn't have to be long. It can be super short. It can be, "Thank you for being precisely who you are." Anything at all. But the reason I want you to do this is because while there's a really high chance that they're doing totally fine and it's just going to make them smile or it might not affect them at all, there's a chance that right now your friend is holding a sousaphone. Thank you.